The prison yard at Blackidge Penitentiary was one of the harshest places any man could walk into. It wasn't the walls, the barbed wire, or the cold steel doors that made it terrifying. It was the cruelty that lived inside those fences, men who had lost all empathy, all restraint, all fear. The air itself felt heavy, wicked rage, noise, and the unpredictable chaos of men who had nothing left to lose. The chaos came to a sudden stop the moment a newcomer stepped into the yard. Manny Pacquiao. He walked with quiet steps, head slightly lowered, hands loosely at his sides. No swagger. No tension. No attempt to prove anything. Just a calm presence in a place where calm rarely survived. A few inmates glanced at him, uninterested. To them, he looked like another average man thrown into a world of predators. But one person didn't let the moment pass. Stone. A towering, broad-shouldered prison bully whose name alone made new inmates flinch. He is the self-declared ruler of the yard. He controlled the white benches, the tables, the basketball court, because fear gave him permission. He hated newcomers who walked quietly. He hated calmness. And above all, he hated people who didn't look scared. And Manny didn't look scared at all. Stone cracked his neck, smirked, and stomped toward him like he was approaching prey. A few inmates noticed the shift in the air and stepped aside. A guard leaned forward, curious but not particularly concerned. They all knew how Stone worked: intimidate, attack, dominate. It was his daily routine. Manny kept walking, unaware, or maybe simply uninterested, in Stone's approach. Then it happened. Without a warning. Without a word. Without even giving Manny a chance to turn around. Stone kicked him. A full force, boot-to-back strike that echoed across the concrete like a gunshot. Manny stumbled forward, his knee touching the ground. The sound cut through the yard so sharply that everything else, white clanking, talking, lawing, stopped instantly. The silence was so sudden, it felt unnatural. Dozens of inmates froze mid-step. A basketball rolled away slowly, untouched. Even the guards turned their heads, not because they cared, but because something about this moment felt different. Stone lawed loudly, clapping his hands once as if he had done something heroic. "Welcome to Blackidge, old man," he barked. Lesson number 1. Know your place. Manny didn't respond. He didn't glare, didn't shout, didn't rise with fury. He simply placed his palm on the ground, steadying himself before standing up slowly. His breathing remained even. His eyes calm. His expression unreadable. This unsettled more people than the kick itself. One inmate whispered under his breath. "Why didn't he react?" Another muttered. "That's not normal. Anyone else would have swung at Stone by now." But Manny did nothing. He dusted off his palm gently, like a man brushing away a leaf instead of recovering from a violent attack. Stone stepped forward again, amused. "UDF. Or just stupid," he snarled. "I said no. Your place." He pushed Manny's shoulder. Still nothing. Manny looked up, not with anger, not with fear, but with a calmness so controlled, so steady, that it made Stone's confidence dip for a split second. The yard watched with silent intensity. Every man there had seen countless fights, beatdowns, and ambushes, but this reaction, or lack of reaction, it was new. It was unsettling. Stone stepped back, confused by the unshakable stillness in Manny's eyes. And in the frozen moment, something shifted in the atmosphere, something subtle but powerful. The kind of shift that makes every instinct tell you, you just made the biggest mistake of your life. But Stone didn't understand it yet. None of them did. In less than 5 minutes, the entire prison would witness something they would talk about for years. Something that would flip the balance of power inside Blackidge on its head. Something that would turn the silent newcomer into the most respected man in the yard. Because Stone hadn't just kicked any random inmate. He had kicked a storm disguised as stillness. And what happened next would change everything. Morning at Blackidge Penitentiary always arrived the same way, loud, tense, and heavy with the kind of energy that made even the guards uneasy. The moment the yard door slid open, a wave of noise spilled out into the open air, metal white slamming to concrete, inmates shouting across the court, the grating clatter of benches dragged across the ground. The sun barely peeked through the clouds, casting a dull gay light over the reservoir fences that rose like cold, jagged teeth around the yard. Blackidge wasn't a place where men woke up hoping to survive the day. It was a place where they woke up expecting to fight for it. And in the middle of this chaos walked the man who fed off it, Stone. The bully of Blackidge. The self-appointed king of the yard. A man whose presence alone made inmates change direction, lower their eyes, or suddenly find something else to do. Stone strutted across the concrete with the confidence of someone who had spent years building fear brick by brick. His arms were covered in jeje tattoos, each one representing a fight he claimed to have won. His voice boomed over the noise as he barked commands at those around him. Move aside. Bench is mine. Get out of my space. Inmates responded without hesitation, some out of fear, others out of exhaustion. The gods rarely interfered. Letting Stone run the yard made their job easier. A single man instilling terror was easier to control than 50 men rebelling. Stone thrived in that advantage. He shoved a smaller inmate off the white bench and dropped himself onto it with a law. That's what happens when little birds perch where eagles sit. He mocked loudly as the smaller man backed away, rubbing his shoulder. A group of Stone's followers, 3 men who acted as his unofficial crew, laughed at every insult, every shove, every cruel comment. They weren't strong on their own, but behind Stone, they felt untouchable. And Stone loved that feeling. He lived for that feeling. But that morning, something entered the yard that disrupted the rhythm of his usual dominance. Something quiet. Something still. Manny Pacquiao walked through the same yard gates dozens of hardened men had walked through before, but the difference was immediate. He didn't behave like a newcomer desperate to prove himself. His footsteps were light. His eyes calm. His breathing steady. No tension in his shoulders. No fear in his posture. No attempt to blend in or stand out. He simply existed in the space, neither threatening nor threatened. To the average inmate, this might have seemed normal. But to someone like Stone, who fed on insecurity and fear, Manny's silence was an insult in itself. Stone's eyes narrowed the moment he saw him. Who's that? He asked one of his men. New fish, the man replied, shrugging. Looks soft. Not talking to nobody. Stone grinned. Perfect. I like breaking the kite once. Manny continued walking, not even aware, or perhaps completely aware, of the attention he had drawn. He scanned the yard once, studying the layout, the people, the flow of movement. He didn't judge it, he didn't react to it, he just noted it with the calm observation of someone who had survived situations where fear could get you killed. He moved toward an empty spot near the fence, intending to stretch and get his bearings, but Stone stepped in front of him before he could get far. Well, look what we have here, Stone announced, loud enough for half the yard to hear. Fresh meat walks in like he doesn't even see me. Manny stopped politely, looked up, and said only, excuse me. I'm just passing through. Stone blinked. He wasn't used to polite responses. He wasn't used to calm tones. He was used to stuttering apologies or shaken voices trying to avoid trouble. But Manny's voice was steady. Simple. Almost too steady. Stone chuckled, pretending not to be thrown off. You hear that? He said to his crew. New boy thinks he's too good to say sir. Manny blinked once. I'm not here to cause problems. Stone stepped closer, invading Manny's personal space. That depends. Problems usually start when people don't show respect. Manny nodded, keeping his posture neutral. Respect should go both ways. That line, the simple, controlled line, stung Stone worse than an insult. One of the inmates nearby whispered, oh no, he shouldn't have said that. Stone tilted his head, smiling in disbelief. Is that right? You teaching me lessons already? Manny shook his head. No. Just speaking. But Stone wasn't listening anymore. His ego had caught fire. He circled Manny like a predator circling prey. Manny didn't turn his head, just shifted his eyes slightly to keep Stone in view. Small disrespect movements followed quickly. Stone flicked Manny's ear. Manny stayed silent. Stone nudged his shoulder. Manny simply took one step back to reset his stance. Stone's crew laughed loudly, trying to provoke a reaction. Nothing. An older inmate watched quietly and muttered. That calmness, that's not normal. That man's been through some real storms. Stone wasn't done. He leaned close, whispering with mock sweetness. You scared, little man? You shake real kite or what? Manny replied softly. No. I just don't want trouble. Stone grinned. Good. Because trouble wants you. The yard sensed it. The tension thickened. The bully's arrogance grew. Manny's calmness deepened. Silence stretched like a drawn bowstring. And before anything more happened, before the conflict exploded. A question for you who's watching this. Would you stay quiet like Manny or confront someone like Stone? Tell me below. I really want to know. Stone stood in front of Manny like a brick wall, arms folded, chest pushed forward, towering over him as if sheer size alone could crush a man's spirit. The noise of the yard, the shouts, the metal clanks, the sounds of workouts, still rumbled around them, but it all felt distant, muted, insignificant. The real storm was brewing in the center of the concrete. Manny didn't step back. He didn't challenge. He simply stood still. That bothered Stone more than any insult could have. Stone leaned in close, his breath hot with aggression. Why so quiet, old man? Lost your tongue? His voice dripped with mockery, loud enough for the entire yard to hear. Manny's eyes lifted slowly, calm as still water. I told you, he said softly. I don't want trouble. Stone grinned viciously. Too late. The inmates watching from nearby benches and the basketball court felt the shift. A few nudged each other nervously. They had seen Stone pick fights before, dozens, maybe hundreds, but something about this one didn't feel like the others. Manny's calmness wasn't fear. It wasn't submission. It was something far more unsettling. Stone wasn't used to unsettling. He moved closer, closing the distance until he stood almost chest to chest with Manny. You think being quiet makes you stronger? Stone hissed. You think calm scares me? He jabbed a finger into Manny's chest. This is MY Yard. MY rules. MY world. Manny didn't flinch. His voice remained steady. Strength doesn't shout. Stone blinked. The line hit him harder than a punch. What you say? Stone lied, pretending he wasn't bothered, but his eyes had tightened. You trying to act wise? You trying to sound deep? He slapped Manny's shoulder lightly, mocking him. You talking too much for someone who said he didn't want trouble. I'm answering, Manny replied patiently. The yard became quieter. Inmates glanced over, some rising from benches, others halting mid-repetition. Even the guards on the far tower leaned forward slightly, not out of concern, just curiosity. Stone sneered. You think you're safe because you're calm. You think that makes you special. He nudged Manny with his elbow, harder this time. Say something now. Say something that'll make me change my mind about breaking you. Manny inhaled slowly. I am not here to fight you. That's the problem, Stone spat. I didn't ask what you want. And with no more warning, no more words, no more build-up. Stone kicked him. A brutal, full-strength kick right into Manny's back. The force sent Manny stumbling forward, dropping to one knee. The sound was sharp, a heavy thud that echoed across the yard like a slap against a drum. It cut through the noise and shattered what little normality remained. Everything went silent. A weightlifter froze mid-bench press. Two inmates in the corner stopped arguing. A group playing cards looked up instantly. The basketball rolled across the ground, forgotten. Even the guards paused, not to intervene, but because they sensed something wrong in the air. Stone stood tall, smirking as if he had just won a battle. There we go, he said loudly. Now you know how this place works. A few inmates lawed nervously, but none of them stepped closer. They watched like spectators at a dangerous event, unsure if they should cheer or run. Manny didn't respond. He placed his hand on the ground, steadying his balance. His breathing was controlled, steady. He didn't groan or curse. He didn't even look angry. He just stayed still for a moment, long enough to make Stone's smile fade slightly. Then Manny rose. Slowly, quietly, gracefully. Like someone who had fallen 1,000 times, and had learned exactly how to stand every time. His expression didn't change. His eyes didn't burn with rage or revenge. His fists remained unclenched. Stone's laughter thin. What, that's it? That's your big reaction? Manny turned his head, meeting Stone's eyes with complete stillness. That kick, he said calmly, was your mistake, not mine. The line rolled through the yard like a whisper of doom. Several inmates exchanged glances, as if they had just heard a prophecy rather than a sentence. Stone scoffed loudly, masking the sudden knot forming in his gut. Oh really, he said. You think you can talk back to me? You think I care about your little sayings? He shoved Manny again, but this time, something felt different. Manny didn't move. Not even an inch. Stone stepped back involuntarily. What the? One of his crew whispered. Stone, maybe leave him alone. Something feels off about this guy. Stone turned sharply. Shut up. I said I got this. The guards still didn't step in. They had seen inmates get beaten for less. To them, this was just another ego clash, and Stone always came out on top. But the inmates, they felt something the guards couldn't. A shift. A change. A tension that didn't belong. Manny exhaled once. Slow. Controlled. I'll tell you one last time, he said gently. Walk away. The yard trembled with unease. No new inmate, no ordinary man, talked to Stone like that. Ever. Stone puffed out his chest. Or what? Manny didn't answer. He didn't need to. His silence was louder than Stone's threats. His stillness was stronger than Stone's violence. And his calm was the most terrifying thing in the yard. The conflict had begun. But the real storm was just about to rise. The moment Manny Pacquiao rose back to his feet, The atmosphere in the prison yard shifted like a sudden drop in temperature. Nobody had expected him to stand so calmly after that brutal kick. Normally, when Stone, the notorious bully, struck someone, they either cried out, back away, or begged. But Manny, he simply dusted off his pants and took a slow, controlled breath. Every inmate around the yard felt something they hadn't felt in a long time. Unisi silence. One inmate whispered, Bliawai, isn't he angry? Another murmured, he's too calm. That's not normal. Evan Stone, the man who never feared consequences, felt a strange pressure beginning to tighten around his chest. He tried to hide it by rolling his shoulders and cracking his knuckles, but his eyes kept drifting back to Manny, trying to understand what he was dealing with. Manny tilted his head slightly, stretching the muscles along his neck. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a challenge. It looked more like preparation, like someone getting ready for something they wished they didn't have to do. The inmates noticed immediately. Bro, is he warming up? Someone said. No, this dude is different. Another whispered, stepping further away. A ripple of movement passed through the yard as inmates slowly created a wider circle. They wanted distance. They wanted to observe without being in the blast radius of whatever was coming. Men who usually cheered for violence were now stepping back and lowering their voices. Stone tried to keep control of the situation. The law cracked halfway through. What are you doing? Stone barked, though his voice wasn't as strong as before. Stretching. You think this is some kind of warm-up? Manny didn't answer. He simply loosened his shoulders, rolling them the same way professional fighters do in the seconds before a match. But he moved slowly, deliberately, almost regretfully, as if giving Stone one last chance to walk away. This only made Stone more uneasy. He looked around at the circle of inmates, wanting someone, anyone, to validate his dominance. But the men who normally hyped him up refused to meet his eyes. They had all seen Manny's strange composure. They had seen the warning in his calmness, even if Stone refused to. Two guards began approaching from the far side of the yard. They weren't running. They weren't shouting for order. They were simply watching. One guard nudged the other and whispered something. The second guard raised his eyebrows, recognizing Manny's posture. These guards had seen real fighters before, men who didn't posture or brag. Men who trained for discipline, not intimidation. Men who didn't want a fight, but ended one fast when they had no choice. Manny, one guard called cautiously, let's keep it peaceful. Manny didn't even look their way. His voice remained steady, almost gentle, as he finally addressed Stone. You should stop now. 3 words. Softly spoken. But they hit Stone harder than the kick had hit Manny. For the first time, Stone's expression faltered. His jaw tightened. His hands dropped for a moment before he forced them back up into fists. He couldn't let the yard see fear, not here, not now. But every instinct inside him screamed that something was wrong, very wrong. Stop. Stone scoffed, though his voice wavered. You think you can tell me when to stop? Manny looked at him, not with anger, not with pride, just disappointment. I don't want to hurt you, he said quietly. Those words. Nobody had ever spoken to Stone like that before. Not with fear. Not with submission. But with honest, calm warning. It rattled him. Meanwhile, the inmates were nearly holding their breath. One man muttered, this is bad. He's giving him a chance. Bullies don't get chances unless the other guy knows something. Another said, look at Stone's face, he's realizing it. The tension stretched through the yard like a tight wire. Even the birds perched on the reservoir fences seemed to freeze, watching. Stone took one small step backward. Just one. But every inmate saw it. Yo, did he just step back? Someone whispered. Stone's face flushed with embarrassment. He quickly regained his stance, pretending it was just footwork. No, he snapped. I'm not backing up from you. But his eyes told a different story. A story of fear creeping up his spine. Manny raised his hand slowly, not in a fighting stance, but in a peaceful gesture. You can walk away, he said. No one will think less of you. This was the moment the guards realized exactly what was happening. One of them whispered. He tried to warn him. If Stone keeps pushing, this will end fast. Stone, caught between fear and pride, clenched his fists. He breathed heavily, sweat beginning to form on his forehead despite the cool morning air. What are you? Stone growled, trying to sound intimidating. Manny simply replied. Someone who doesn't want to do this. The yard went silent. The circle widened. Every inmate leaned in, waiting. Because they all knew. When a quiet man gives a bully a final warning, the real storm is seconds away. For a long moment, the yard stayed frozen. No one moved, no one spoke. The silence felt heavy, like the air itself was waiting for something. Stone kept staring at Manny, trying to read him, trying to understand why the man he'd kicked was still standing so calmly. Why he wasn't afraid. Why he wasn't even angry. Two guards stood near the edge of the circle, analyzing Manny's posture with growing suspicion. One of them squinted his eyes, leaning forward, trying to get a better look. His brows slowly knitted together, confusion turning into recognition. He nudged the other guard sharply. Look closely, the guard whispered. At what? The second guard muttered. That man. His stance. His balance. The way he moves. I've seen that before. The second guard frowned, scanning Manny from head to toe. Suddenly, his eyes widened. His jaw dropped. No way, he whispered. It can't be. Stone looked between the guards, confused and irritated. What are you two staring at? He snapped, trying to maintain control. But the guards ignored him. The first guard swallowed hard and took a step forward, pointing at Manny with visible shock. Das. Manny Pacquiao. The name didn't just fall, it exploded. Inmates gasped. Heads jerked up. Eyes widened everywhere. Murmurs erupted like a wave rolling across the yard. Manny Pacquiao. The boxer. No. Manny Pacquiao. You're kidding, he's in your yard. Stone blinked rapidly, shaking his head. Wait. Manny Pacquiao. That can't be right, he stuttered. But the guard didn't hesitate. Yes. That's him. Another guard chimed in, voice trembling with disbelief. Not just a boxer. Not just famous. He swallowed. That man is a world champion. One of the greatest fighters alive. The energy in the yard flipped instantly. Where there had been laughter and arrogance, there was now fear. Where there had been confidence, there was now disbelief. And where Stone once stood like a king, he now stood like a man who had accidentally awakened a sleeping giant. Stone's face drained of color. His bravado melted. His breathing grew shaky. He stared at Manny the way a man looks at a tiger he thought was a house cat. You're AM. Stone whispered, barely able to speak. Manny didn't puff out his chest. He didn't smirk. He didn't take advantage of the shock. He remained calm, exactly as he was before. If MY name matters more than MY words, Manny said quietly, then you weren't listening. Stone stumbled backward. I didn't know. I thought you were just some old quiet dude. Manny took a single step forward. It was gentle, controlled, measured. But that one step held more power than any punch Stone had ever thrown. Inmates flinched. Guards stiffened. Stone froze completely. Because the step carried the weight of a champion. Someone who had stepped forward in the ring thousands of times, toward men far stronger than Stone, and defeated all of them. The yard erupted with whispers. Bro. Stone kicked Manny Pacquiao. He kicked an 8th division world champion. Stone's done. Man, he's lucky Manny didn't break him in half already. Stone's legs wobbled. He looked like he might fall at any moment. His hands slowly lowered from their fists, trembling as if even the air around Manny carried pressure. Manny lifted his hand, not in a fist, but in a gentle, calming gesture. I told you I didn't want trouble, he said. His voice wasn't loud. It wasn't threatening. But it carried authority. A lifetime of discipline. A lifetime of strength restrained by choice. Stone swallowed painfully, unable to look away from Manny. I'm sorry, he whispered. I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know. Manny nodded once, as if acknowledging the apology, but not excusing the action. Strength, Manny said softly, is not using your fists. He paused. It is knowing when not to. The inmates fell completely silent. They weren't looking at Stone anymore. They weren't mocking him. They were staring at Manny, like they were witnessing something sacred. Even the guards seemed humbled, unsure whether to intervene or simply keep their distance. Stone's knees gave out, and he dropped to the ground, not from a punch, not from pain, but from fear and realization. He had attacked a legend. Manny stepped closer, not aggressively, but purposefully. Stone flinched as Manny stopped right in front of him. But Manny didn't hit him. He didn't shove him. He didn't humiliate him. He simply looked down and said, "You thought hurting others made you powerful." He shook his head gently. But hurting others is weakness. Real power is control. Stone lowered his head, unable to speak. Manny turned away, walking back toward the center of the yard with that same calm energy. No arrogance, no victory. Just discipline. The guards exchanged looks. The inmates parted like water. Every eye followed him. Because the reveal wasn't just that he was Manny Pacquiao. It was that he was a man capable of destroying the bully, yet choosing peace instead. And that silence, that restraint, hit harder than any punch ever could. Stone remained on his knees long after the whispers faded. The man who once strutted across the yard like a king now looked like a soldier who had just realized the war was never in his favor. His breaths were shaky, uneven, as if each one carried the weight of his colleague's pride. Around him, inmates formed a wide circle, no longer out of fear of him, but out of respect for the quiet man who had never raised a fist. The entire yard seemed to be waiting for Manny's next move, as if his decision alone would determine what kind of place Greystone Prison would become. Finally, Stone managed to lift his head. His voice trembled, barely audible. I'm sorry, he said, swallowing hard. I didn't know who you were. I swear, I never would have touched you if I knew. Manny looked at him with calm, steady eyes. That's exactly the problem, he said, his tone soft but heavy with meaning. Your respect depends on who you think someone is. That is weakness. Stone winced, as if the truth hurt more than any punch ever could. He bowed his head again, unable to meet Manny's gaze. Manny stepped forward, not with aggression, but with purpose. He wasn't a predator approaching prey. He is a teacher approaching a lost student. Stand up, Manny said quietly. Stone hesitated. Get up, Manny repeated, but this time, his voice carried no threat, only expectation. Stone pushed himself shakily to his feet, not daring to rise fully until Manny nodded permission. His hands trembled as he dusted his knees, avoiding the eyes of the inmates around him. Manny took a breath, then spoke with the same calm, composed tone he'd held since the beginning. You walk around hurting people because you think strength makes you feared, he said. But strength that needs to prove itself is not strength. It's insecurity. Stone blinked, stunned. No one had ever spoken to him like that. Most people either feared him or fought him. No one ever tried to understand him. Manny continued, real strength, true discipline, is choosing not to harm when you easily can. Inmates nodded slowly. Even the guards, usually cold and detached, exchanged doubtful looks. It was rare, almost unheard of, for someone inside these walls to speak with such clarity, such depth. Stone stared at the ground. I don't know how to be that kind of strong, he whispered. Manny's voice softened. Then lean. The yard went quiet. A guard stepped forward cautiously. Sir, do you want him written up? Do you want us to take him to solitary? But Manny raised a hand gently. No, he said. Punishing him won't teach him anything. Let him stand here. Let him learn from this. The guards nodded respectfully, something they rarely showed to inmates. But Manny wasn't just an inmate anymore, not in their eyes. He had become the most disciplined man inside the yard, a figure whose presence demanded respect without forcing it. Stone slowly lifted his gaze. His voice wavered. Why would you let me go after what I did? Manny replied simply, because if I strike you, you learn nothing. If I forgive you, you might change. Stone's eyes glistened, not from tears, but from realization. For a man who always survived through fear and dominance, this moment felt like a mirror reflecting everything he'd done wrong. I want to try, Stone said softly, almost ashamed. I don't know if I can, but I want to try. Manny nodded. Change doesn't start with perfection. It starts with intention. An older inmate near the back murmured, Man, this guy's on another level. Another added, Stone finally met someone he couldn't break, and it fixed him instead. Manny turned to leave, but Stone took an instinctive step forward. Manny. The entire yard held its breath. Stone said quietly, Thank you for not becoming what I expected. Manny didn't turn around. He simply replied, Be better than who you were yesterday. Then he walked away, calmly, quietly, with the same presence he had entered with. But the atmosphere around him had changed completely. Where before inmates barely noticed him, now they stepped aside respectfully. Where Stone once commanded fear, now Manny commanded admiration. Where guards once watched him as just another prisoner, now they watched him like the man who brought order without even trying. The bully who once dominated the yard now sat on the bench, deep in doubt, no longer the monster inmates whispered about, just a man trying to understand the meaning of strength. And from that day forward, Greystone Prison felt different. Yelling turned to quiet. Fights turned into distance. And every single morning, when Manny walked into the yard, inmates straightened their posture, not because he demanded respect, but because he earned it. Without throwing a single punch, the yard slowly returned to motion, but something in the atmosphere had shifted forever. Where moments ago there had been noise, chaos, ego, and tension, Now a strange calm hovered over every face. The same inmates who once gathered around violence like moths to a flame now stood quietly, absorbing the weight of what they had just witnessed. It wasn't a fight. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't a clash of muscles or dominance. It was a lesson, delivered not through fists, but through restraint. A lesson no prison wall could contain. Manny Pacquiao walked back across the yard with steady steps, not triumphant, not proud, simply composed. His calmness wasn't the absence of power, it was the presence of control. Every inch of him radiated a simple truth that no one in that prison would ever forget. Strength is never proven by who you can break, but by what you choose not to break. Inmates watched him in silence, some confused, some inspired, and some shaken by the realization that the world had more depth than they'd allowed themselves to see. Stone remained seated on the bench, staring at his own hands. They were the same hands he had used to intimidate, threaten, and dominate. But for the first time, he wondered what they could do if he chose to use them differently. Manny's words echoed in his mind. Change doesn't start with perfection. It starts with intention. For Stone, that intention began in that moment. Not because Manny humbled him with violence, but because Manny humbled him with grace. Around the yard, the whispers changed too. Once, Stone's name had been spoken with fear. Now, Manny's name was spoken with respect. He didn't hit him, not even once. That's real strength right there. Man, the whole yard feels different now. Imagine being that powerful and that calm. Even the guards had lost their usual expressionless masks. They exchanged small nods, acknowledging that the man in front of them was not ordinary. They had seen countless fighters, countless tall men, countless loud threats. But quiet power. Self-control that could shut down violence without ever raising a hand. That was something rare. That was something unforgettable. As Manny approached the far side of the yard, he paused for a moment, not to speak, not to turn around, but to let the silence settle. The kind of silence that teaches more than any lecture ever could. Because today's lesson wasn't only for Stone. It was for every eye watching, every ear listening, every soul who felt that quiet shock in their chest. Respect is not a reaction, it is a choice. Control is not weakness, it is mastery. And humility. Humility is the truest form of strength. Because a strong man can win fights. But only a disciplined man can stop them. Slowly, Manny exhaled, as if letting go of the tension others still held. Some inmates straightened their posture out of instinct. Others lowered their eyes, reflecting on the way they had lived inside these walls. A few even followed Manny's movement with something close to admiration. And Stone. He watched Manny walk away with a mix of gratitude and shame. He had learned more in 5 minutes than he had in years of fear-driven dominance. Later that day, Stone would approach Manny again, not to challenge him, not to impress him, but to thank him. A small step, but the beginning of a new path. A path he might never have chosen if Manny had chosen fists instead of wisdom. As the guards began escorting inmates back inside, one of them said quietly, "Pacquiao, you changed the whole yard today." Manny simply nodded. Sometimes, the loudest lessons are taught in silence. And that was the truth of the story. Not the kick, not the conflict, not the reveal, but the message it carried. Respect isn't something you give only when you know someone's worth. Respect is something you give because of your own. Strength isn't in fist. Strength is in self-control. Humility isn't weakness. Humility is the courage to stay calm when your power could shake the world. And sometimes, the quietest man in the room is the one the world should never underestimate. If you felt the lesson in this story, if you believe real strength comes from humility, if you believe respect should be given to everyone, not just the powerful, then type respect in the comments. I want to see how many people still believe in real strength, the kind that doesn't need to shout. And before you scroll, tell me, where are you watching from? I reply to everyone who spreads kindness.